Today I'm gonna rank every single unit in Squad Busters so that you know which ones are the very best, and I'll even talk a little bit about drafting priority. And the reason you can trust my recommendations is that right now I'm in the top 70 globally as of the time of this recording. And although the people above me are way better, I've had the opportunity to fight the majority of the people that are in the top ranks, and I've learned a lot by battling against them. So stick around in this video, because it's gonna be a longer one and we're gonna rank every single unit and tell you why they earned the rank they've earned. We're gonna go in the order that you unlock all these units, and we'll have timestamps in the description here so you can jump ahead to whatever you want to see. And we're gonna start with the very first world, the first units you get, baby. This is gonna be a pretty straightforward recommendation. We're gonna take the Barbarian and put him squarely at a B. It's a solid all-around unit. It's gonna be in your front line, and when you pair with another Barbarian, it flips to an elite Barb. Both of them do, which is pretty sweet. You also can flip it to an elite Barbarian when you slay 3 enemies. I find that it is a versatile unit, but not my go-to draft choice in the late game. In the early game, like your first world or two, it is a pretty solid early pickup. You need to go the route of actually smashing lots of PvE content to get your coins to progress your squad. You're not going to be sad to pick it up late, although you'd be hoping for better, and early on, it will serve you really well. From there, a controversial pick. The Goblin. The Goblin is actually surprisingly good, and I'm also going to put him at B. And he really sucks to draft late, but you love to see him early, you love to see him in Double Trouble, and you really love to see him in Doppelgangers, where it switches all of your units over to the unit you've selected. You can switch to Goblin, he rains down coins from the sky every time you get him, and then in Doppelgangers, you can just switch him to something else when you get a new chest upgrade. So I really like the Goblin for a fast start. That is a unit you want to fuse as fast as you possibly can, typically no more than one of these in the squad and you'll be fine. And if you want to see some true Goblin insanity, I'll have a card up in the top. You can watch that video later. This brings us to Greg. Greg is also the GOAT for early game starts. And the thing that's crazy about Greg is he also protects you in the late game. He will work as a way to crawl your way back in or survive long enough and play around the outside. So Greg lets you chop down trees. Chopping down trees gives you coins and it gives you emeralds, and that's pretty sweet. The combination of these things and the fact that there are trees all over the map, even the center of the map where the most important fighting is happening, makes Greg a very solid choice for an early start. Now, there are other units I actually prefer, but we'll talk about those later on because they unlock much later. Now this brings us to a unit that is somewhat controversial to rank, and that is Colt. In the early game, Colt as a unit is pretty strong, but I'm gonna rank him at a D. He is really high DPS, but he's a one-trick pony. It's DPS, and that's not really what I want my one-trick ponies to be doing. Generally, I want my one-trick pony to like do a big stun, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. We got one of those coming up next, but I think that there are many other ranged DPS units that I would prefer over Colt, which means I can't rank him very highly. Even though you get him in your squad, you fuse him up, he'll do a lot of damage. He is kind of squishy, little vulnerable to getting popped, especially if they sneak around and ambush you from behind. If you're enjoying this video, do me the honor of throwing a like on here and subscribing to the channel for more Squad Busters content, and code Chisgule will be live starting 5/28, which is the way you can support my channel. I really appreciate your support. Which brings us to El Primo, which I also I'm unfortunately going to give him a D. Now, El Primo seems really cool when you first get your hands on him. And look, at the start of the game, you don't have many options. He's going to be good. But later on, you'll have other options for tank units. Now, El Primo does periodically stun. That stun is pretty big. I would rather get that stun other ways, and we'll talk about what some of those other ways are. I've also found that El Primo is a really bad early draft. You pick El Primo off rip at the start of the game, your DPS is too low. You definitely would rather pick a Colt at the start of the game and an El Primo toward the end if you end up with the option for him and nothing else. And that is generally a true statement of the tankier units in this game. If you get them toward the end, you can snap a one-off sort of into your squad, and they're less likely to get popped because they're defenders, they're tanky units. El Primo is one of those units. We leave him at a D, and now we talk about the lowest ranked unit in the board here. That is the chicken.
Why you bullying me?
Look, I kind of want to make a video where I jokingly take chicken at the start. So I just tried it out and I was like, okay, how bad could it be? And I did it a couple games and these were some of the worst starts I have possibly had. So as far as I can tell, the use for the chicken is in game modes like Doppelganger, where you switch to the chicken, he drops a bunch of speed boots for you, and then in Doppelganger, the next time you open a chest, everything switches to the new unit type. So you can, pick chicken if you have to, and then pick something else and you no longer have chickens in your squad, which is, I think, where you want to be. No chickens in the squad. Which brings us to a unit that is actually really outstanding, and that is the medic. And I think I have to rate the medic kind of higher than both the barb and the goblin, but within the same tier of power level. He's not really there to do damage, but he does passively heal your squad, and that is sweet. It is a very powerful effect. You want to have either a medic or later we'll talk about Pam in the squad to keep you sort of up and running and healthy. Now, we're still in the first world of heroes, and there's a lot of stuff you gain access to. One of them is Dynamite, and I do not like Dynamite. Dynamite does area of effect damage, and that should be cool, but let me tell you the way that fights I experience them actually work, which is that one side or another freaks out when something pops. They see a couple of their units die, they freak out, they run, and then they really get wrecked. So what that means is that doing a lot of damage, but distributed across a bunch of enemies is not as good, in my opinion, as the focus fire that even Colt is offering, and I don't particularly like drafting Colt in my squads either. So Dynamite and Colt for me feel sort of a low role in the tier list of DPS without a cool trick to go with them, which brings us to the Hog Rider, who is basically just a cool trick. And he is a very, very cool trick. I'm giving him an A. When you go through bushes, you get a speed boost. That is sick. It lets you chase people down. It lets you run away sometimes if you need to. That is so powerful. And by the way, Greg and a Hog Rider together do work. I made a video about this. Technically, I think it was a YouTube short, where basically every tree is in a bush. So you just get a speed boost from tree to tree to tree. The downfall of the Hog Rider is that he's a frontliner, and he's not exactly tanky. Like, he's kind of tanky, but not really, especially before you've fused him, which means he can get picked off super easily if you don't have some other frontline that's going to be charging in. Now, on the topic of having other frontline that will rush in, I'm a little bit torn as to where to put the Witch. We're now at the epic tier of rarity from the first world, and the Witch easily could be an A, and I could also see as an S. For the purpose of this tier list, I'm gonna bump it up to an S, but I'm cautious about that. It's going to be my lowest rating for S tier. And what Witch will do is summon skeletons, and those skeletons are really annoying and great for you. When you put your sort of skeletons between you and the enemy, often you can use them as a sort of meat shield or bone shield, as it were, right? But the thing that makes that powerful is that sometimes they will try to hit you, but can't. They try to like creep around you, but your skeletons are in the way, and they shoot the skeletons, and that is absolutely fantastic. Technically, you get a barrel of skeletons as well with the 3-star evolution of this, which I find to be just okay. It's good to use as sort of like a taunt for the enemy's units. Like, you throw it up near them and then they'll shoot that instead of you, which is really good. So I think you can do cool things with Witch, and it is a nice starting unit, although epics at the start are weird because I like to fuse units right away in games, and you really can't do that with a Witch. Like, you're not going to get that many epics, but she's strong. Which also brings us to the Barbarian King. And this dude is possibly my #1 pick for the whole thing as the strongest unit in the game. Why? The Barbarian King makes all of your units that attack at close range attack faster. That's insane. But also, he does a pummel effect, which is kind of like a mini knockback. And also, he'll start to heal himself passively when he's out of combat. Dude is a complete package. And what I like about this is that you can get a one of with this unit in your squad, and even if you don't fuse it, which you almost certainly won't, he will do well. Whereas the next unit we're going to talk about, the Archer Queen, she is also S tier, but often I find gets popped. So the Archer Queen is, of course, a ranged unit. She's got some really cool effects, also passively heals out of combat, and elevates the damage of all the ranged units in your party. So getting these two units into your squad is huge. it transforms the squad, which is exactly where you want to be. But I find that the queen is easy to get ambushed and lose, or to have someone creep around you in a fight and pick off. Whereas the barbarian king, yay, he's going to be in the front. He is very tanky, and he does that really well. Now, this brings us up to the next world, baby. So let's go over the next set of units you're going to unlock. And we're going to start with Shelly. Shelly does a fat stun, and this thing is awesome. I would put her in the B tier. I think I would prefer to start with a goblin. I would prefer probably a Shelly to start over a barb, just because the stun later is so good. And if somebody tries to ambush you early, that stun can be really good also. So we'll put her in at B, and she is one of my go-to ranged units in this game. Hands down, the stun and disrupt in fantastic ways. The next unit we're gonna rate is a bow, and bow's kind of tricky. He's a PvE dude. He gets a huge % damage boost when you're battling PvE stuff, monsters, and that's good. There are plenty of maps, like the one with the moles that pop up, right? Or ones with, presence all over the map. Glitter critters, right? Those maps, he is really good. Also the map with trees, that's a good one. Not the trees you harvest, but the ones that attack you and try to steal your soul. Those trees. Anywhere there's huge amounts of extra PvE things to smash, bow does well. Bow also periodically drops mines, and those mines can wreck people. That is a stun-like effect. I'm putting him at C because he's obviously not as good as Shelly for battling other players, and at the end of the day, yeah, the PvE stuff is good. Killing monsters is good. But when another squad rolls up on you, I'd rather have a Shelly than a bow. Which brings us to Nita. Nita's kind of a tricky one to rate. I'm going to put her at B, or rather him at B, but I don't love Nita. Nita is a little bit vulnerable. Nita's got a really low hit point situation going on. Not very tanky. But the bear that Nita's got, of course, is. So if you get ambushed from behind, you are in trouble. And this happens a lot. Squads sort of smash into each other, and then everybody's shooting at everybody, and it gets messy. I'd rather my tanky units be more tanky in and of themselves. They can't get popped when you get into a fight. Because once that starts happening, the enemy is like, oh yeah, I got you. I'm not going to run. And you start to freak out. It's bad. It's bad, man. So I'm going to put Nita at B. I think they're fine. Not my priority. We got stronger stuff coming, okay? And this brings us to actually B over here. And B, I'm going to rate at D. Now, B is a weird one. This is going to be a controversial choice that I'm making. B, when you actually collect Bs, has a powerful area of effect damage radius. Just around you, people take damage. The problem is, to get a B, you pretty much have to leave the middle in most maps, if not all. And that is not where you want to be. You want to be in the middle. If you're going to win, you need to be in the middle. You need to dominate the middle. You are not dominating the middle if you leave. And when you leave, that means other people get to have free reign in the area where you are supposed to be a terror, making sure that nobody's capitalizing on all the goodies that are there. So I think that B is a low rating, not because it isn't powerful, but because by the time I want to start drafting B, I need to be in the middle or I'm losing. And so there's a mismatch of what she's doing and when I want her in the squad. The other thing is that she is super squishy. So you can't just take her early when you don't have protection. Someone with a hog rider or a max can just roll up behind you, pop her, and before you even know it, they're on their way to do something else. It just is a little too squishy. And I just don't see her in any of the top tier squads because I think you have to leave the middle to get Bs. And for as long as that's true, I don't think she's going to be viable. My 2 cents. Not that she's bad, but I'm not drafting her. Which brings us to the battle healer. Now she is freaking awesome, but you only want one in the squad, and I'm going to give her a B. She is going to increase the max health of your squad. Pretty cool. She doesn't give ongoing healing, and that is probably the downfall. But she does make your max health of every unit higher, 400 at the sort of base level, and then 600 at the highest 3-star level that's available today. Now that is cool. One in the squad and you're good. Her DPS is so low. It's so bad. Oh, and if you switch to her in doppelgangers, I'm sorry, you just lose. So yeah, we're gonna put her at a B. Great unit. Put one in the squad at some point and then you have it and you're good. By the way, she does heal the squad after you open a chest, which is kind of nice, but we'll get to a unit that has a better effect for that. For now, we need to talk about Max. And Max, who I've come to learn is a she, question mark? Am I getting this right? Is an insane speedster. She makes you go faster. That's sick. You get a Max and you're like, oh, hey, I'm zipping all freaking over the place. Max is a great unit, a little bit squishy, but I think I give it an A. You could debate swapping the Witch and the Max, and I think that would be super reasonable to do. I think the Witch, however, is a complete package, can provide frontline, does range DPS, whereas the Max does one very specific thing, speed. And there are times where you need speed. Having a Max or not having the Max will be the reason you live or lose certain matches, which is really important. Now, this brings us to the next world of unlocks. Now we get to talk about Mavis. Mavis is the carrot picker. You've heard me call myself a plucker before. I pluck carrots, and like, she's very good, but I've come to feel like she actually is a C rating, which is a bit of a bummer because I would have thought she's higher, and she's a great start, but you have to leave the middle to pluck carrots. And if you're winning, you're in the middle. So she's fine for like making sure you get top 5, but not a great pick to get number 1. I'm not saying you can't win with her when you use her at the start. I'm saying that leaving the middle is not what you want to do when you're the overdog. And if you're positioning to be the overdog, you don't have a Mavis in your squad. Is what it is. But once you can start plucking carrots, she is cool. She can get you a good start. And I have used her specifically if my other options are not a good start. And on the topic of not good starts, the trader, F. Bro. Okay. So the trader, when you collect coins, will periodically give you emeralds. I find that I'm zipping from place to place. He'll decide to drop emeralds after I've already started to leave the place where he's going to put them. So I'll be on my way, he throws emeralds behind me, and I have to turn around if I want the emeralds. Bro. And on top of that, he does periodically heal, which is really cool. But every time I put him in my squad, it's really, truly kind of a dead spot. I think the trader has potential for like a play the outside strategy, but I'm not convinced, and I want to be convinced. I actually genuinely want to be shown that Chicken and Trader are amazing. I don't think they are. So they both are keeping themselves company in the F tier. Now we get to talk, however, about the Wizard. We're up to rare quality of units here. And the Wizard, I'm gonna put at a C, which like might sound a little weird. The Wizard does area of effect damage and opens up another spell slot. Having 2 spell slots is pretty sweet, but as far as I can tell, maybe I'm doing this wrong, and this would certainly change my rating, but you can only use the spell that's on deck, I think, rather than any spell you want. Could be wrong on that, but either way, he's a little bit squishy. He does nice area of effect damage. Having an extra spell slot is nice. I'd probably rather have one of the units in B. The only thing I might maybe consider switching is where I would put Nita. Like maybe I honestly would bump Nita down, put the Wizard up. Either way, it's neither here nor there. We'll move the Wizard to the front of the C category. He's good, but not what I'm looking for, typically. Okay, what I am looking for is Pam. Pam is what I'm looking for. I'm gonna put Pam in the B tier. Pam drops a healing field, and when you fuse your Pam, that healing field gets bigger. Now that healing field gets deployed when you open a chest, which feels pretty awkward. But if you can bait somebody to fight you at a chest, which has happened before, it is very hard to wipe your squad if you are roughly equal strength and you've got the healing field down. Plus, when you open up the Pam, she's gonna give you a healing spell, which lets you drop a healing field. Also pretty cool. Pam is a nice pickup that I didn't appreciate when I first got her, but once I've gotten the hang of her, I'm starting to like using Pam more and more. Which brings us to the Royale King. The Royale King, the final epics you'll unlock. The Royale King is kind of quirky. I'm gonna put him at C. He deserves better, but let me explain. The Royale King as a unit on his own isn't doing much for you, but when you open a chest, he summons minions. That's kind of cool, but they don't go with you wherever you're going. So if you're opening chests with him in your squad, you need to do that where the action is, which is dangerous. So he's like good, but tricky to kind of use. He'll give you a spell where you can deploy a minion, which is kind of cool, but like, I don't think he's what I want toward the end of a match, because where he puts the action is not typically where the action is. Even though you could kind of make the same argument for Pam, you kind of could. Healing is just so much more valuable than what he's doing. What he's doing, you got other units that can do cool stuff too, okay? Which brings us to Mortis. On the topic of cool units. Mortis will resurrect the minions you slay, or monsters, I suppose I should say, and he rises them to fight for your army, which is cool until you realize that I don't think you can put elite monsters into your army, like baby dragons or some of the other things that you'll see. So it is very powerful, and he deserves his title as an all-rounder for sure. I just don't think he's quite S tier, but I certainly couldn't put him down below in B. Like, having the resurrected units in your squad is pretty sweet, but I do find that toward the late game, if I'm in the middle, I'm not finding many of the units that he will resurrect as things that I am slaying, which becomes actually a problem. So he's an A, he's really good in the early game, and he's fine in the mid game, but I find that toward the final 60 seconds, he's not really offering a ton for me in the way that I would hope and expect from a unit, okay? Now this brings us to your final unlocks. Very poggers. So the final unlocks include 3 units. We've got the Heavy, and the Heavy, bro, I'm rating that as an A. Putting that at the front of A. Maybe we put Max at the front of A, actually. But then the Heavy. So what does the Heavy do? The Heavy is super tanky. He does damage, but he does even more if you're standing still. And the thing that I like about the Heavy is that he is survivable, ranged damage. I've been using him to start and then rushing the middle and finding I am doing better than when I was playing other ways with other units. He is very quickly becoming my go-to initial draft pick, which is extremely meaningful. So the Heavy goes up in A, and I am very much enjoying using that unit. It's not uncommon for me to potentially get an upwards of 2 fused heavies in the squad, although that feels a little bit excessive because you'd much rather have tanks. And this goes all the way up at S. It is a rare unit. I'm putting it in S tier, and it is insane. So she on her own is weak, but when you find a tank in the middle, she is insanely tanky. And she also does a huge blast that does big damage. Yeah. She's very good. You will see in every top-end squad 2 tanks, maybe 3. Every winner's squad has tanks. I am telling you. It is crazy. You will not see someone win without tanks. I don't think so. I mean, okay, it's gonna happen, obviously. This game's crazy. But I really want to emphasize for you how good I think this rare is. This rare is goated, okay? Now, contrast that to Penny. I'm like, Penny's cool. All right, she'll drop a treasure map. You can go get the treasure map. She has huge range DPS, but she is squishy. I don't like squishy. You see a trend here in what I'm picking. I'm picking utility, survivable, generally. Now, maybe I have a ranged DPS problem or an overall DPS problem in the way that I've made this list, but I would put her at a C. Now, when you do find a treasure map, you get some sick loot, but to find a treasure map, you have to leave the middle. Leaving the middle is not what you want to be doing, and especially if you get an Angry Vines map, where the vines move really fast, you'll find that the maps are no longer even accessible without taking fat vine damage. So the place where she really shines, in my opinion, is on Doppelganger, where you can have your whole squad turn into pennies. They drop a bunch of maps. You pick up the maps. You switch to something else. The maps still work, baby. You don't have to have her alive to go still collect your treasure. You already got her treasure map, so you don't need her anymore. GG! So with all that said, I think this is where we land for Chisgule's first version of a tier list for squad busters. If you enjoyed this video, throw a like on here, subscribe to the channel. If you got value from this video, do me the honor of that subscription. I really appreciate you. And in case you missed some of my live streams and gameplay, I'll have cards in the end screen. You can check those out to see some of these units in action. I'm not saying I'm the best dude on the field, but I am really enjoying playing this game.